All right, evening, everybody. We'll get started. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sacco? Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Adelius?
Here.
Here. Ms. Christie?
Here.
Mr. Stevenson?
Here.
And Chairman Buck.
Here. Great. And open public meeting statement.
Adequate notice that this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Bernardsville News, Bernardsville, the Courier News, Somerville, and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 6, 2015.
All right. Everybody can rise for the flag salute, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We have minutes to approve for January 7th. I've looked at them, no issues. Anybody have any comments? Have you presented them back? Okay. We have a motion to approve January 7th minutes.
So moved.
Moved. And second, please. Okay, Mr. Martin. And all in favor of approval January 7 minutes? Aye. Okay, so we'll pass the minutes for January 7th. The only correspondence worth noting is that we did receive on December 28th a letter from New Jersey DEP regarding KDC Solar, and effectively DEP has canceled their application due to the application being inactive for a period of 3 months or more. So this is going to be something that KDC will have to deal with directly with DEP. Okay. Comments, anybody in the audience would like to come up and make a statement, make comments about any particular item that's not on the agenda tonight, we welcome you at this time. Okay, seeing none. We'll go to pending applications. Float Center Land Use Board 15012, Mr. Ferrara.
And that one's still incomplete. There's some documentation that we're waiting for from the applicant on that one.
Okay. And then Land Use Board 2015015, which is the McGrath application.
This one is incomplete, but there's literally one piece of paper that needs to be signed. My recommendation is that since KDC has requested to be carried from the first meeting in February, that this be tentatively placed on the agenda for the first meeting in February, so we can get that done and cleared out of the board's calendar.
Okay. Any concerns on doing that?
No.
Do we need a vote for that? No, we're good?
Mr. Chairman, you can just schedule it for that date.
All right, so we schedule it.
And
That's
that will be a
great.
completeness and hearing the same night because we don't have the documentation to deem it complete tonight.
That's fine.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to swear in both of our professional witnesses. They weren't able to be here last week, and I wanted to remember, and I remembered. So Trina didn't have to remind me. So
I didn't.
Paul and Frank, you may remain seated, especially Frank, and please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And please state your names and addresses for the record. A business address is sufficient.
Paul Ferrero, 1A Main Street, Chester.
Thank you, gentlemen. The board recognizes and accepts their qualifications. Paul as a professional engineer and Frank as a professional planner.
Okay.
And we're ready then, Mr. Chairman, for our first hearing.
All right, great. We will immediately move to Bedminster Funding, which is Land Use Board 15009, first appearance.
Before we get started, we are having one recusal that will be of record tonight, and one of our members represents Advance, so is recusing and will exit the dais. And we also, I believe, have a recusal by Lou Javine as well, and he is not going to be participating as owning property nearby.
Right.
All set?
Sure, ready to go.
For the record, Tom Alman, I'm an attorney with Day Pitney and Parsippany here on behalf of the applicant. This is property located at 1400, 1420, and 1430 U.S. Route 206. It's 15 acres in size, located in the ORV Office Research Zone, Village Zoning District. And I'm sure you've looked at the application. The application involves a use variance as well as some other bulk variances. And essentially, we look at it as an exciting opportunity to sort of transform this site, which is the location where the Forbes building is, or commonly known as the Forbes building. This is an application to essentially create a mixed-use development on the site. It will have some residential components, some office components, and of course some retail components. I won't go over the variances, they're all listed in the application, but suffice to say the board has jurisdiction as a board of adjustment because a use variance is required. In terms of our presentation, let me just, before I get to that, we are not seeking site plan approval at this time, and that's, we're bifurcating is sort of the legal term for the case. And the significance of that is we're not going to give you detailed drainage and detailed lighting and detailed stormwater management, things you would typically see for a site plan development. If the board is fit to grant the approval for the variance, we would come back at a later date and go through the site plan issues. So you may have questions about lighting and about landscaping and about drainage that we may not be give you the perfect answers on because we haven't studied it yet. But ultimately, if this project progresses, we'll certainly get to that level of detail and we'll address all those kinds of issues, but we're just not prepared to do that just yet. And it's basically a way for us to figure out whether the board is interested in this project, if the board sees fit to approve it, and if it does, then this will develop and evolve over time. In terms of our team, let me just go through that quickly for you. We have Peter Cocosiello Jr. representing the applicant. Jay Otto, who you'll hear tonight, is basically a real estate appraiser but a real estate analyst, and we'll talk a lot about what's going on in the state with office parks and the challenges they face, and really dial it down to Bedminster and talk about what's happening in this municipality regarding office uses and what the dynamics are. Rob Michello, who you probably know from Gladstone Design, is a licensed engineer as part of our team. Dave Minnow, a licensed architect. Gary Dean, traffic consultant, and Paul Phillips, our professional planner. Our thinking for tonight is to kind of keep it at a high level and just introduce you to the project. Mr. Cocosiello will get up and say a few words on behalf of his company about their ownership of the property and their vision for the property. We're then going to have Mr. Otto, the real estate analyst, talk about these conditions I've mentioned, what's happening in the state and what's happening here in Bedminster, to kind of put this in context for you. And then Mr. Minnow, our architect, will talk about the overall design scheme and the idea behind this mixed-use project. And we think that's enough for tonight. We'll hold off the other witnesses for nights to come. So that's kind of our thinking for this evening, assuming that we get that far, but I think that's a realistic opportunity to do that. So unless you have any questions for me, I'll call Mr. Cocosiello.
Thanks, Mr. Mel.
And we'll begin.
Appreciate it. Yep, go ahead. You can just where you went before we did.
Mr. Cocosiello, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? I do. Please state your name and address. A business address is sufficient.
Peter Cocosiello, 1041 Highway 206, Bridgewater, New Jersey.
Would you please spell your last name?
Cocosiello.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cocosiello. Why don't you just tell us your affiliation with the applicant in this case, and then we'll talk about, why we're here, what your company is seeking to do, and why it's seeking to do it.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I want to thank you for the time this evening, giving us the opportunity to bring our team in front of you to present some of the beliefs and vision we have for this project. I said my name is Peter Cocosiello and my family owns Advanced Realty. In 1979, our firm was founded by my father, Peter Cocosiello, right down the street here in Gladstone. My father, having not grown up in New Jersey, was enamored with the beauty unique to Somerset County, and specifically Bedminster. That's why for the last 37 years of our firm's history, he has decided to strategically build and grow our company directly across the street from where we stand today. Some of my earliest memories with him were spent on the construction site of that project, trying to learn a lot about this business and understand how things work. And what really happened during that time is because it was really my first job, I developed a strong admiration to Bedminster. And it's a place that no matter where I go in my life, I always consider my home. And because of that, this is a community that I have dedicated my life's work and our company's future to. The purpose of being here today is to protect the life of our community by creating a place that provides the greatest level of happiness for all of our people. This is a culture of collaboration and natural interaction, a place where the demands of residents and business alike are met in one place. Imagine an environment where you can walk downstairs from where you live, grab a cup of coffee, work on the computer, connect to Wi-Fi, go to the gym, pick up something to eat at a nice organic market, all within walking distance of your home or your office. Imagine a place where people can sit outside in a lushly landscaped park, under a bench, reading a book, or connected to Wi-Fi. This is exactly the kind of place that we feel is necessary in attracting and retaining the high quality of people and business that we've all enjoyed in Bedminster for many decades. Having lived and worked in this area for such a long period of time, the definitely changing demands in the residents, retails, and office users that we need to address. Jeffrey Ott will be speaking to you in a little bit, discussing some of the preferences and economic changes in our country, our state, and specifically in this community. We believe the product we're proposing tonight is going to address many of the concerns Jeff's going to be speaking to you about. We also believe that there are many residents, businesses, and retailers that desperately seek to be located in this community. And unfortunately today, we don't have the product that all of these people are specifically seeking. So we're going to spend some time tonight talking about what that product is and why it's necessary to have in today's world going forward. David Minnow, who's a fabulous architect, will be discussing the architecture and beauty of the product we're also proposing. Dave, along with the people of Advance, have spent countless hours designing and imagining this incredible place for this community. The quality of this project is really outstanding, and I hope you think the same way once you see it. You'll also hear from our engineer, Rob, and planner, Paul Phillips, at the next meeting. We're going to try and keep it very short and simple tonight, high level. You'll hear from Dave and then, Jeffrey and then Dave. As I reflect on this project and tonight, my purpose is really to create a place where people collaborate with each other amidst the lushly landscaped areas that we're planning on creating across the street, where companies can innovate from a small one-man shop into a global enterprise, which we've seen happen already, and where people can live an extremely high-quality product taken care of for them, so people can have a greater opportunity to spend time doing things that they prefer doing instead of taking care of their homes. But ultimately, we desire to create a place where people and businesses for a longer period of time will continue to call Bedminster their home. So I really appreciate the opportunity and thank you. And if there's any questions or anything anybody, including members of the public, have, we'll always be available to answer them, and we really look forward to working with you guys on this project.
Thanks. It's nice to have you guys here. Appreciate it. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public, Mr. Coziello? Sure, come on up, sir. Yeah, just the process is you'll have to come up and introduce yourself, get sworn in, and then maybe we could ask you, because of the cameras and the audio, just to find a, I'm not sure where the best place is.
You can just stand right there.
You can stand right there, sir, after you get sworn in.
Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
And please state your name and address.
Richard N. Hemmer, H-E-M-M-E-R, 160 Somerville Road, Bedminster.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Please go ahead.
I'll use mine.
Sure. Go ahead, sir.
If the article in the Burnsville News is correct, I wonder why the board is even discussing the proposal. There are 7 variances requested that fall in 3 categories. Category 1,
Is there
a use.
a witness, and this isn't the time to make speeches or to...
No, we'll just, let's just hear what he has to say. I mean, we'll, we want to try to give everybody an opportunity just to speak.
A use variance for retail residential use in an office resource village zoning district. Second category, 3 variances to exceed current limits. Building height of 52.9 feet, which is more than 132% of the 40-foot limit. Ground coverage of 58.79%, which is more than 235% of the 25% limit. Floor area ratio of 38.19%, which is more than 282% of the limit, almost 3 times the limit. The category, 3 variances for falling short of current limits. Front yard setback of 10 feet, which is only 10.2% of the required minimum, only 10%. Rear yard setback of 88.3, which is only 88.3% of the required minimum, and 622.6 parking stalls, which is only 76.3% of the required minimum. These requests are not a matter of a small give and take on the current requirements, but are major overhaul. To request such excessive variances shows total disregard of the town's right to set certain parameters. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Herman. Mr. Herman, I'm curious, but why would you think, I just want to ask, just because, we're glad you came up here, thank you.
Pardon?
I just want to ask you a question, so I appreciate you coming up here and making a statement. This is typically a long process, and we'll hear lots of witnesses, and it's good that the public gets involved, because it's the only way that we can hear how people feel. But I am curious, you made an interesting comment about the board. You're surprised that the board is going to hear something like this. Why would you say that? I'm just trying to understand your thinking.
Because it's so excessive of the current limits.
Sure.
It's max in the township space. Why do they even have limits if I'm going to totally ignore them, not by a little bit, by an excessive amount?
Right. No, I appreciate it. I mean, you realize, of course, that, so much of what we do is deal with variances and changes to ordinances or changes to master plans, and that's the whole purpose of the hearings. And, the applicants...
I appreciate all of your giving your...
Yeah, of course.
time.
Well, we're all citizens here, we all live here, and, we obviously are not going to do dumb things for the town, but I am glad that you came up and said it, and I appreciate the fact, at least I understand your thinking, so we appreciate the time, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of opportunity to ask more questions of the witnesses.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay.
Will we have time after the presentation for questions?
I'm hoping that the applicant may be willing to spend a little time with the public, if that's possible.
Absolutely.
Then I'll speak, I won't take my chance.
I'm sorry, sir?
I'd like to speak.
Yeah, sure, of course, absolutely. Come on up, and if you have a question, or you still have to get sworn in, but if you have a question or a statement.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and address.
David Erickson. I live in Reddington. My mother lives adjacent to the property. I'm representing my mom.
David,
Okay.
can you maybe spell your name for the record? You can talk to the mic.
Okay, it's R-I-C-S-O-N. My mother lives on Lamington Road
And how long has she lived there, Mr. Erickson?
since 1960.
Okay,
I was
good deal.
born and raised in Bedminster. I was there before the Forbes building. I remember cows. Okay. I want to know how it's going to enhance anything for the residents that have lived in this town this long. You're talking about new residents. I'm concerned for the people that have lived here for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Before the hills, before AT&T, before 27 for many people. And I'm concerned. My mom's happy where she is, as I'm sure many of the long-term residents are. My parents both went to Burnsville High School. They really lived in Bedminster. They didn't just pass through it. They went on the way to Peapack. With all due respect, maybe on the way to Bridgewater. Okay, they've lived here. The Alls Park was built back there. I was a little surprised by that when it happened. Now it just seems to me that the residents that are in that zone are just being pushed out. If you think about the name, the Village of Bedminster, I mean, is this conducive to a village atmosphere? I don't believe it is. And as far as the variances in your zoning laws, the law guidelines, I mean, if we're going to have a parlay, I know you have to
Right.
hear, but it just seems like there's way too many questions, way too many variances. They didn't go ahead with the specific plans, and if I was in business, I wouldn't go through with the specific plans either and spend more money if I wasn't sure it was going to go through. So I'm sure they have their doubts. If you want to sit on a park bench, go sit down the Palm. There's a memorial bench with my dad's name on it. All right. So landscaping, this is country. This is country. How, people come to Bedminster because it's Bedminster. You mentioned, I grew up in Bedminster. Whoa. How's that going to last? It's not Hillsborough. You drive through Hillsborough, you can really drive through Hillsborough.
Right.
Is that what's going to happen to 206 here, 202 and 206 here? And I'm concerned about the traffic in front of my mom's house would be selfish for my mom. But I see many residents that I've seen since I was younger. So I'm just expressing my concern for my mom, my mom's concern, and concern for some of the residents.
No, look, we appreciate it. And you did ask Mr. Kokoziel a question at the beginning, and maybe you can just take a minute. Look, I'm not trying to I don't want to lead anybody for answers, but I just want to make sure that in the beginnings of these hearings, everybody gets a chance to say their piece, at least those that want. The question, of course, is what's in it for me? He had a concern over the current residents, and if you want to wait and not necessarily respond at this time, it's not a problem, but is there something that you'd like to say to Mr. Erickson, or would you prefer just to let the evening wear on?
Yeah, I really appreciate your comments. I understand them clearly. I think that, we should let the professionals talk about the specific aspects of the project, and I think that maybe you'll probably have more questions, and some of your questions will be answered by some of their testimony. Looking at it from the 3,000-foot level, I think that any sort of development in a community, as long as it's thought out well and implemented correctly and maintained correctly, which is the same thing that happened 150 years ago here when the village was originally built, and things have changed. And you need to adapt to the changing world in a way that we still preserve the architectural integrity of the community, and that's what we're really trying to do.
Okay, I understand the trend now is, I know because I have kids the working age, out of college, moving on, their friends. I know the trend is Jersey City, working in the city, Hoboken, one's now Hoboken West, okay? This is Morristown. It's, people here commuted to the city to work. I don't think you should bring the city to the country. People from the country can go to the city and enjoy the atmosphere out here. And when this happens, it's going to, where does it stop? And Bedminster is built on mom and pop businesses up and down the strip. I feel good riding up Main Street in Bedminster. It's beautiful. Start to make the turn, and you see the modern buildings and everything happen. It just changes until you get back down by the pond a little bit. But so new businesses coming in. I mean, okay, changes come in. I mean, I've had to work down in Baltimore. I've had to work in Boston. I've worked up and down the East Coast. And you go to these places, and you're in a Chi-Chi's or something. It's anywhere USA. Where you are when you go in these places. In Bedminster, you have the businesses that have their own names. They have character. And I think that's a part of the town. I don't think you want to lose that part of the town. And I slipping away. And up here, it hurts. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. We
Thank
appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Come on up and introduce yourself. Okay, when we still have to have you come up and get sworn in, and you'll have plenty of time for more questions. It's not going to be a problem.
Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
And please state your name and spell your last name.
Nancy DiCarlo, D-I-C-A-R-L-O, 110 Somerville Road in Bedminster. I just have a quick question for the gentleman here. It'll be interesting to see what the plans are that you are going to present this evening, but my question is this. Has Bedminster Funding just recently purchased properties on Somerville Road that adjoin the Forbes building property now, currently? So none of those properties that were recently sold were sold to Bedminster Funding. Okay, that's my question.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Erickson, sorry?
Can I just ask one more question?
Sure. Yeah, that's okay. You just want to up there. You have to go by the microphone because we need you on video and tape.
Great. Your company, this company hasn't purchased it. Has any company that's affiliated with your company bought them?
In a partnership arrangement.
In a partnership arrangement. So there's an affiliation with the purchase.
That is not affiliated with this application.
Okay, right, not with your application, but it's affiliated with this thing, with the company. And-
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr.
Okay. All right, good enough. Thanks a lot. Mr.
Thank you,
Millman.
Mr. Cusiello. We'll call Jeffrey Otto, please. Excuse me. Do you stand or sit? What's your pleasure?
I think I'll sit.
Okay.
Mr. Otto, you may remain seated. Oh, that's fine. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you, and please state your name and address and spell your last name.
Jeffrey Otto, O-T-T-E-A-U, Business address is 15 Brunswick Woods Drive in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Personal residence is 6 Johns Drive in Warren Township, Somerset County.
Mr., are you employed by?
Otto Valuation Group?
You're a licensed appraiser, is that correct?
Yes.
But you're also yourself, or you call yourself a real estate analyst, is that how you describe what you do for the most part?
Yes. My work, both as a valuation expert and as an analyst, is a licensed activity here in New Jersey. New Jersey holds 3 different levels of licensure. I hold the highest level, which qualifies me as an expert in all property types, residential, commercial, industrial, and special use properties as well. I've been working in this field, it'll be 40 years coming up in a couple of months. I'd say I am a resident here in Somerset County and have been involved in thousands of projects here in the county. My work involves providing guidance on real estate development to a range of clients, primary among them the financial community, banks and financial institutions, government. I work for many government entities here in New Jersey, helping them to understand how the changes that are occurring in our economy, in our communities, and in our real estate markets are impacting local community. I also provide these services to the development community as well, builders and developers of real estate.
And you've testified before planning boards, boards of adjustment throughout New Jersey?
Yes, I've been qualified as an expert at all levels of the courts here in New Jersey, bankruptcy court, superior court, and as well as before hundreds of municipal planning, zoning, land use boards throughout the state.
Any questions regarding his qualifications?
No, and the board will recognize and accept Jeffrey Otto's qualifications as a real estate appraiser and analyst.
Thank you.
Please go ahead, gentlemen.
Mr. Otto, why don't you sort of talk about these so-called trends, and we'll dial it down and talk about what's happening in Bedminster as well.
Sure. So a good starting point is just to explain what I have been asked to do, which is to develop an opinion as to whether the proposed development, as it's being presented to you here tonight, is first a viable use, meaning would it be successful, and secondly, whether it would fill a need here in the local community, an unmet need that's not presently being satisfied. The project as it's proposed, and you'll hear much more about this later in far greater detail, but the project as it's proposed would construct office space, retail space, and housing. The office space to be constructed is approximately 31,000 square feet of space. That would be in addition to the existing 88,000 square feet of space that is already on the site. So it would increase the total office concentration by about 35%. The development that's proposed would also construct approximately 30,000 square feet of retail space on the site. There is no retail space that currently exists there. And also, there is proposed to be 77 dwelling units on the site, which are anticipated to be multifamily rental units, apartments. Probably a good place to start out is just to provide a bit of context for this application. And beginning with economic circumstances, as you may know, New Jersey has been the worst performing state coming out of the recession in terms of job recovery, in terms of what's happening with household income, in terms of the effects on people who are living here in the state. The state has only recovered about 2/3 of the jobs that were lost between 2007 and 2009, and here we are now in 2016. The nation has recovered 100% of the jobs it lost and added another 4.5 million on top of that. New Jersey has still only recovered about 2/3 of its jobs. There's also been a tremendous effect on household income here in our state. Looking at from before the recession began until the present time, nationwide household income is down by 4% over this lengthy time period of 2007 to 2016. Here in New Jersey, income has fallen by 18%. And so that has had a significant effect on household income and on the funds that New Jersey residents have to live their lives. Switching gears, there has also been a series of very dramatic demographic changes that are occurring here in our state and very locally as well, which I'll begin to address now. One of the big changes that we've seen is that a majority of households in the state and locally as well are either one person or two persons in size. To put some numbers to that, statewide, 60% of all households are only one-person households, one person living alone, or two people living together. Here in Bedminster, it's even higher. In Bedminster, 77% of all households are only one persons or two persons in size. There's a number of reasons for this to be occurring, but primarily it is the economic change that we've seen, the changed circumstances that we have here in our state and locally as well. Another significant change that we've seen, which provides a context for this application, is that we have seen a dramatic rise in what is called childless households. Now, childless households are defined as households without any children 18 years of age or younger living at home. Statewide, we have now risen to a point where 66% of all households in New Jersey are childless, have no children 18 years of age or younger. In Bedminster, that number rises sharply to 80%. 80% of all households have no children 18 years of age or younger. In addition to that, we have seen a significant decline in the rate of home ownership, and that's correlating into a corresponding increase in demand for rentership, for apartments to be rented for people to live their lives in. So with that as background, what I'd like to do next is take you through the three different components of this project: the proposed office space, the proposed retail space, and the 77 dwelling units, which would be rental apartments as they are proposed. Beginning with the office space. The market conditions, the demand for office space in New Jersey has been decimated and shows no signs of improvement. Vacancy and availability rates, the amount of space that's actively being marketed and looking for someone to take occupancy and either buy it or pay rent to the property owner, that vacancy and availability remains very highly elevated with little or no sign of reducing. And in the process, rental rates have declined significantly. When we take a look at what's happening locally here in Somerset County, and I'm going to dial it down even further in a moment, when we take a look at the availability of office space that's currently being marketed here in Somerset County, and we compare that to the space at which users of office space are either purchasing that space or signing leases to occupy it, the quantity of that space at the rate at which it is being filled equates to 48 years of supply. In other words, at the rate at which new users are moving into office space, it will take about 50 years to fill what's already available in the office market. Now, I want to point to you, however, that the majority of that space in Somerset County, and in fact statewide, is concentrated in very large footprint, single-user types of buildings. The corporate headquarters of 20 or 30 years ago, where a single user would occupy a building of several 100,000 square feet and run it as either a regional headquarters or a worldwide headquarters. That's the predominant type of office space that we have here in our marketplace, and that market is completely shambles. Local evidence of that can be found with the two buildings which are directly west of this site. referred to as Somerset Financial Center. There we have two very attractive Class A buildings, and Class A buildings means that they are the best of class of all types of office space, and both of those buildings, which total 233,000 square feet of rentable building area, are sitting vacant. That is not an unusual story. It's actually a very common story as we look through New Jersey's mostly affluent suburban towns that were once the host to this high demand for corporate headquarter office park types of settings that have seen the circumstances change dramatically. Now, the reasons for this very high vacancy, these chronically weak conditions, and I might point out that the economic recession that we think about, that we went through a while ago, ended in June of 2009. So that recession at this point ended 6.5 years ago. In fact, most economists agree that we're getting ready for the next one, because these recessions tend to recur every 6 to 8 to 10 years, and we're already at this point 9 years since the last one began. I put that out because what that tells us is that the conditions that we're experiencing in large footprint office buildings here locally and throughout the state is not a temporary phenomenon. This is not a question of a temporary cycle that we're going through, which is soon to correct. In my calculations, it's at least 50 years off into the future. And so the reasons that we're going through this is certainly New Jersey's very high cost that it imposes on business in terms of operating here. Businesses are universally focused on finding ways to reduce costs, and it's difficult to do that here. Real estate is expensive, land is expensive, costs of living and therefore salaries are expensive, and taxes are the highest in the country on businesses. Another reason for this is that we're seeing this very painfully slow recovery of jobs, and most of those jobs that we're still missing came out of the office occupying sectors of the economy. And finally, and very significant to this application, is that businesses are shifting to smaller footprints in their office usage. Companies are looking to occupy smaller size spaces with smaller staff size and lower costs. And in the process of that, larger size office buildings are at a tremendous disadvantage. Now, while the market is chronically oversupplied for large-scale office buildings, and there's probably more of that to come, there still are some legacy users, occupants of large-scale office buildings here in the region and locally that will probably over time make the decision to leave. We just heard yesterday the news that General Electric was pulling out of Fairfield County, Connecticut, taking with it thousands of employees and heading to Boston. This is not an unusual story. This is playing out all across the country. While the market is chronically oversupplied for very large-scale office buildings, the exact opposite is true for much smaller-sized office spaces. What I would refer to as more of a boutique size of office space in the range of a building in the range of 5,000 to 10,000, perhaps as high as 15,000 square feet in size. As I have examined that part of the marketplace, we find that the market is vibrant. The market is actually quite healthy, and that the availability and vacancy in those spaces is incredibly tight. For example, overall, the availability rate for office space in Somerset County, and availability is a measurement of how much space is currently actively being marketed, looking for someone to move into it. Availability rate for office space in Somerset County today, well, as of when I prepared my analysis, 22%. The number does shift very slightly with the passing of time. 22% all in for all forms of office buildings. That's certain death. No sector of the economy can succeed if more than 20% of its space is sitting empty and not paying rent and not covering expenses. But we'll shift down in Somerset County to space which is smaller in size, with an average size of about 10,000 square feet, that availability rate drops from 22% to about 11%. And within a 5-mile radius of the site, the application site, within a 5-mile radius, just to give you a sense of what 5 miles looks like, 5 miles is a circle that would have, at the very top, it would have PPAC, the upper edge of PPAC. At the very bottom, it would have the northern boundaries of Bridgewater Township. To the east, it would be Tewksbury. I'm sorry, to the west, it would be Tewksbury. And to the east, and I've forgotten that number, but I'll give it to you in just a second. To the east, that boundary, well, now I've got myself into it. To the east, that boundary on the 5-mile radius, I apologize, it's slipped my mind. Okay, to the east, that boundary is the corner, just to give you a sense of what a 5-mile radius looks like. 2.5 miles in each 5 miles in each direction. So focusing on that 5-mile radius, the ability of office space here locally in this local 5-mile radius falls from 11% to 2.9%. An extremely healthy and extremely vibrant sector of the marketplace.
That's just for the smaller size office.
Just for smaller sized office space. And so what we find is that the market is actually undersupplied with smaller sized buildings and dramatically oversized for larger sized buildings. And all of this ties into the changes that we're seeing in the economy. There is significant benefit to the community in constructing smaller size office space. And the primary benefit is that the businesses that occupy smaller sized buildings tend to be more upwardly mobile, tend to act as economic incubators for the economy. This is where smaller sized startups, in many cases data-driven or technology types of businesses, will locate. And over time grow, and as they grow, they create demand for the larger office space that is struggling so much. And so the smaller size office space would not only fill a need because it's undersupplied, it would bring employment, it would bring all forms of real estate demand, housing demand would come with it, as people naturally would prefer to live closer to where they work. It will bring retail spending demand for local businesses as the people working in those offices look for somewhere to go to have lunch or to pick up something that they need to purchase on their way home. And it would serve as a catalyst for filling this chronic vacancy that we see today that exists in large-scale office space. Thus, the logic behind the proposal to construct smaller size office buildings on the space. Moving next to retail space. As I mentioned, there is, as part of this application, the intention to construct retail space on the site. Different from what's occurring in the office market, the retail market is actually quite vibrant. It has fully recovered from pre-recession conditions. Vacancy rates are back down to below where they were before the recession started. Occupancy rates are quite high, and rental pricing has been increasing, all indications of an improving economic circumstance. Just to give you an idea of how that plays out, the vacancy rate for office space within that same 5-mile radius.
Retail space? Or?
Retail space, I'm sorry. For retail space, that vacancy rate is currently 2.6%. Extremely healthy, indicating that there is an unmet supply and that the market is able to accommodate additional space to be constructed. Another aspect that I took a look at in my analysis was to construct what's called a retail spending gap analysis. And essentially what that looks at is whether or not the existing retail businesses that are located here locally within a 5-mile radius are able to satisfy the spending needs of local area households. And the answer to that was a definite no. Residents are needing to drive greater distances in order to satisfy their retail spending needs. And that is a concern. It's a concern because first, it creates an inconvenience to residents, and secondly, it creates a disadvantage for existing retailers. Consumers today are primarily interested in being able to accomplish their retail spending in one stop, getting it done as quickly and easy as possible. And in an area where there is a shortage of existing retail capacity, it forces local residents to go somewhere else to fill their needs. And I've been able to identify a very large gap here in the local market in terms of the shortage of existing retail capacity in this local marketplace. So to be considered from the retail side of the equation is that, as I mentioned, there is the proposal to construct 77 housing units here on the site, dwelling units. And that would bring with it 77 households who would be bringing their income with them and looking for places to be able to spend that income to satisfy their retail needs. So not only would the retail space that's proposed provide an unmet need, a benefit for existing residents, but it would also provide a spending outlet for the households which would be locating in those 77 dwelling units. There also would be the advantage to your existing retail community because it's undersupplied. By introducing additional retail space into the local market, local businesses are likely to see their business increase because of the synergy that it creates as shoppers or people looking to visit a restaurant or to get a cup of coffee or to go to a local store find that there are more choices in an area. They tend to frequent it more and spend more of their dollars in that place, which creates an overall benefit for all of the retailers in that area. The last piece of this application is the proposal to construct 77 dwelling units on the site, which would be in the form of rental apartments. The housing market for rental apartments, you may know, is the strongest segment of the entire real estate economy. We have seen a significant shift in housing preferences in recent years, since and before and since the recession. Much of this is driven by the demographic changes that I talked to you about earlier. It's easy to see that 80% of your households are childless here in Bedminster. And if 77% of your households are only one person or two persons in size, it's inevitable that there will be less need, less demand for larger size family-oriented types of housing and a greater need for smaller size living spaces. The rental side of the housing market has been doing extremely well. That's been true for a number of years now. Demand has risen significantly. The construction pace is unable to keep up with that demand. And that's especially true here in Somerset County. This region of the state has the lowest vacancy and the greatest shortage of housing in the state. Taking a look at specifically what's proposed here, just to give you some idea as to what the characteristics of these proposed 77 apartments would be. They would be a mix of one-bedroom and two-bedroom apartments. So there are not anticipated at this time to be any studio-type apartments, nor is it anticipated that there would be any three-bedroom apartments, because one- and two-bedroom apartments are specifically geared to the smaller-sized childless households which dominate the New Jersey today. And they would have rents today, in today's dollars, an average rent of somewhere around $2,300 a month for an apartment that would be about 1,100 square feet in size. Just gives you a sense of the range here. Now, these are only preliminary projections, recognizing that because rental rates are rising every day, every week, every month, if the project were ultimately to be constructed, the rental pricing would undoubtedly be higher because rental rates are appreciating and the project is still would be a year or two off before it could be constructed and occupied. Also, market conditions change with time, so all of this is subject to some variation. But in today's dollars, those rents would be in the range of $2,300 a month. And looking out to 2 to 3 years down the road, looking at 2 years down the road, that rent would rise to somewhere in the range of $2,500 a month projected for something that would be on average 1.5 bedrooms, just to give you a sense of how that looks. From an income perspective, operators of apartment properties are very careful about who they rent their apartments to. It's a very large capital investment, takes a lot of capital to build a project. And so it's very common and in fact necessary that apartment operators will screen their prospective tenants to be sure that they can afford to live there, can afford to pay the rent on time. Based upon the standard qualifying ratios that apply today for apartment renters, that rent in today's dollars of $2,300 a month would translate into a minimum required income of $73,000 a year. So that just gives you a sense of the profile of who would be occupying these apartments. And the $73,000 is in 2015 dollars when I issued this report. By the time it would be constructed and rents would go slightly higher, we'd likely be looking at income levels, minimum income levels of $80,000 in order to qualify to be able to live in these apartments, and that's based upon a 38% income to rental cost ratio. In terms of who would likely live in these apartments, I took a lot of time to look at the occupancy in other apartment properties, the demographic characteristics and the income characteristics of the local residents. And the occupants who would live here would primarily fall into one of three categories. First, what we call new household formation. Young people who are starting out in life and have found employment and want to rent their first place to live, but who are looking to live in a more upscale, modern, recently constructed property that is conveniently located to employment and to other types of amenities. So new household formation would be a significant part of this. There's another category that we call renters by choice. And renters by choice are people who typically are a bit older, in their 30s or 40s, who prefer to not be homeowners. This is a significant share, a significant part of our local demographics, of people who really don't want the responsibilities and the costs and the permanency of homeownership, who would like to have the ability to be mobile. And finally, the third component that would likely live here is what we would call older age households. People who are currently owning single-family homes in the greater Somerset County area, who are ready to sell that home, who are looking to downscale, downsize their housing occupancy, reduce their costs, but still want to maintain a local residence here locally. Some of those people will be occupying these apartments as their primary residence. Others may be selling their primary residence here and purchasing another in Florida or Arizona or Nevada, but looking to maintain a local residence here to be close to families and friends and all the acquaintances that they've known through the years. Essentially, what this boils down to is that the occupants will primarily be what we call the bookend generations, those who are 35 years and under and those who are 60 years and older. And this is very typical of what we're seeing in other types of suburban apartment types of properties that have been constructed. And there's one other aspect that I just want to talk to you about here before I wrap this up. Which would be an additional benefit of this project. In conducting my research on your local population, one of the things I examined was to see how your population has been changing by age group of residents. So not only what is the overall population change, but more importantly, how has that change been occurring by the age of resident? This gives us very useful insight in understanding the local economy and the local real estate market. What I found here locally was alarming. Over a 10-year period, the population of 25 to 34-year-olds, this is one half of the bookend generation that I told you would be a primary candidate to live in this project. The population of 25 to 34-year-olds here in Bedminster over 10 years has declined by 25%. That population is rising nationally. That is the generation you read about and hear about in the news all the time. It's called the millennials. They are now the largest component of the workforce. It was just announced yesterday, there are more millennials working today at companies than any other generation. They have now bypassed baby boomers. Another alarming statistic is that the 35 to 44-year-old population, those renters by choice that I talked about, has declined by 27% here in Bedminster over 10 years. And as you might expect, you are also seeing declines in population of children, those that are under 5 and those that are between the ages of 5 and 9. Now, what I want to point out to you about this erosion, this loss of younger age households, is very problematic to your community. It's problematic for a couple of reasons. And the reason that young people are leaving when they're surveyed from suburban towns is what they're saying is, I'd love to stay, but my town doesn't have the kind of housing that I can afford and would prefer to live in. The lifestyle-oriented rental experience that young people are gravitating toward today. The reason they're leaving is because of a scarcity and insufficiency in terms of the types of housing that's being proposed here, which is 77 dwelling units. The significance to your local economy is tenfold. For one, if young people aren't moving in but are leaving, that creates a systemic weakness in your housing market. As older age households look to sell their houses, if young people aren't coming here, they won't be here to purchase the houses that need to be sold. But more importantly, a loss of 25 to 34-year-olds, which is the most coveted group for employers to recruit today, translates into higher vacancy in your office space. Employers universally are focused on hiring the best and brightest 20 and 30-year-olds that they can find. They are the future. But when an employer decides on where to locate today, their checklist of what they're looking for in order to seriously consider a location to locate their jobs, the very top of that list is there a place nearby for young talent that we want to recruit to be able to live? And are there nearby retail services? Because workers today don't want to be locked up in the prison of the office building from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. They want to be able to get out and take a walk to somewhere where they can get a sandwich or a coffee or a salad. And so the housing units would not only fill a need sorely lacking in your local community, but it would provide a significant boost to office occupancy. It would recruit to live in the apartments the very same people that the businesses find to be crucial to their business plans. And so in conclusion, it's my testimony to you here tonight that the project that's being proposed is exactly right for your community. It will introduce a much-needed, smaller-sized boutique-type office space, which will act as an incubator, help to fill over time the chronically high vacancy that exists in office buildings. And as you know, when that occurs, it stabilizes the tax rateable. As office buildings sit vacant, they become less valuable, and as they become less valuable, they file tax appeals and pay less in taxes, which in turn transfers the tax burden increasingly onto the residential tax base. The office space that's provided will serve to address that. The retail space will improve the lifestyle for existing residents. It will fill an unmet need. It will fill a void. It will fill a gap, and it will serve as a benefit to local existing retail businesses by bringing more focus, more concentration, more synergy into that local space. You've seen this on highways in new car dealerships. They all locate near to each other. Why do they do that? Because they want to create a one-stop place for people to be able to go and spend their money, and they all sell more cars as a result of being located adjacent to each other. The same effect would be here, and the retail space would also serve as a benefit to the existing office space, because that experience is lacking. And then finally, the apartments that are being proposed are anticipated to be luxury-oriented. The rents will be high. The income levels of the residents will be high as well. The residents who occupy these, the 30 and 25-year-olds, they're referred to as walking wallets, people who come into a local community and spend their money at local businesses. And it will also provide a place for those who are leaving to be able to stay, and for older age residents to be able to move down into smaller housing space and still enjoy the beauty of this magnificent town here. And that concludes my testimony.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Otto?
Thanks, Mr. Otto. So I'm now depressed that Bedminster's become age-restricted, the whole town. Anyway, let me just ask my colleagues first. Any questions? Good.
What were the actual numbers of 10 years ago and now? You said it decreased by 25%.
What was that?
What was it, the 25-year-olds?
Oh, the 25 to 34-year-olds?
Yeah.
Numbers?
Yeah, what were the actual numbers?
Sure, okay, I can give you that. So we're talking about the population change by age group in that particular case?
That's what you were talking
Yeah.
about? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding
10
what...
years ago and today, it decreased 25%. I'm just curious what the actual numbers were.
Sure. I just need to think about, I don't have those numbers memorized. There is a chart in my report, and I believe my report was distributed to
Yeah, we have a
everyone,
copy
but
of it.
that report shows the percentage change, not the actual
Yeah, what are the
hard,
actual numbers?
hard numbers. I would need to pull that up on the computer. I don't have that memorized.
Where did you get the numbers?
Census Bureau,
Okay.
U.S. Census Bureau.
So you don't have the numbers?
I do. I mean, I could, if you'd like, I can go over and
No, we don't.
open up my
Well,
laptop.
why don't we, just to keep things moving, George, why don't we make sure you follow up and get us that?
Sure.
And this way we can figure out if there's other questions. So let me just make sure, George, you have any others? You want to get that information from Mr. Otto?
We can easily provide that.
Well, yeah, if we can get that, that'd be useful.
Yes, sir.
And, go ahead, Mr. Dracoff.
Was there any particular retail that is missing in Bedminster that you've identified?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there is, and, well, the missing retail components in Bedminster are partly by design. For example, new car sales are a form of retail spending, but they're not appropriate for this location. In the report that I submitted, which was dated last year, I actually went through a very careful analysis of each type of retail spending sector. It appeared on page 80 of my report, and we actually quantified, where the shortfalls fell. Certainly, the largest shortages, the largest gaps that exist here locally, was in convenience stores, specialty food stores, and restaurants, both full-service and limited-service restaurants. Residents are traveling a great distance to be able to satisfy those needs, and those would be the largest. There was also a shortfall in what's called personal care and health types of stores that are selling perhaps natural foods or healthcare products, not drugstore related, but more fitness and nutritional types of products. Those are among the largest gaps that I found. And I did go through that in my report.
Yeah, I see it now.
I have another question. Did you refer to the Bedminster Master Plan at all?
I did not. And so my work is looking at a blue sky, and considering where the need lies. As to how this aligns with your master plan, that would be for a planner to address. Planning testimony.
What type of office users did you have in mind for these boutique-type offices?
Yeah, so it could be actually a very wide range of potential users. Certainly, new business startups that would be smaller in size, technology-oriented would be candidates. One of the fastest growing sectors of office demand today is in medical practitioners. The combined effects of the aging of the population, coupled with the Affordable Care Act, which has expanded access to health coverage, is translating into increased demand for that type of occupancy. We could also see professionals who would choose to locate here, attorneys, accountants, things of that nature, engineering firms. Also, likely, I expect that some of the demand for this space will come from large companies who have a very large office footprint somewhere else, where the head of that company or the head of that division, perhaps a CEO or a CFO, lives locally and would like to be able to establish a local office closer to where they live as an annex or a satellite to operations that may be some distance away. So it would be a wide range of users that would likely occupy here. Certainly, real estate is a possibility, insurance is a possibility, finance is a possibility. These are referred to as the FIRE sectors, finance, insurance, and real estate. They would be candidates for this as well. So there's a fairly robust range of users who would potentially locate here.
Okay, thanks. So if you can get Mr. Rodilius that information, let me ask the public if they have any questions for Mr. Otto.
Yes, Chairman.
So, sir, come on up, and again, you've been sworn in, so if we can get you up by the mic, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, let's just stick to the rentals.
And may I just take one pause? I'd like to get my bottle of water because my...
Absolutely.
is dry. Just take me a
definitely.
second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sorry. Thank you for that.
Okay, sticking to the rentals. Sure, high end, upper end. People are going to pass through this town of long-term residents, use it up and leave for a couple of years. An age group that you're speaking of, I hear a lot of numbers, percentages. I don't feel the passion for the need. I hear numbers, okay? Happen to have kids in that range. I have all my best friends have a number of kids in that age range. They have gone to the concrete. We've killed to raise them out in the country. That's what they want. They got the clubs right outside. How many clubs are you going to put in town? How many microbreweries are going to have in town? That's what they're looking for. And if you talk to them, in statistics or what you can pull off the internet, if you speak to these kids, they'll tell you that when they have kids of their own, they're going to come back to a town like this. And that's what they said. You talk to them firsthand, they want to raise their children here. They want to live there, have their fun, get a career started, and they come out to these communities and raise a family.
Mr. Erickson, if I could just ask you, this is a little bit more, I'd like you to ask a question.
Oh, okay.
Right, so this is less a statement time, it's more question.
Okay, then how many people of that age have you spoken to that express the need for this outside of paper? Personally.
Well, my investigation did not go to the level of interviewing potential occupants of the apartments, but what I have done is to speak to operators of modern apartment properties in suburban places to understand the profile of who it is that they're renting their apartments to. And overwhelmingly, The occupant is childless households of one or two persons in size who are predominantly 35 years of age or younger, but some of which are 60 years of age and older. I understand quite well what that sort of example that you gave, because I was just talking yesterday with my mother, who's now 90 years old.
God bless her.
And she was reliving for me the day that my son, her grandson, drove her to Hoboken to see where he was moving. And she really broke into tears. And she said, "Oh my goodness, your grandfather and your great-grandfather did everything they could to get you out of a place like this. I can't imagine that you're going to go back." So you're really pretty close to the truth in terms of that movement and the change. I do not agree with you that generation is going there because they don't want to be here. My research tells me that the reason they're going there is because the housing product that's relevant to their lifestyle exists there and does not exist here. And when we couple that with the fact that New York City had the fastest economic recovery coming out of the recession, we had a situation here where when young people were finally ready to get out and work and find their own place, the only jobs that were being offered were in New York City, and the only place that had housing that was relevant and affordable to them was in more urban settings. Urban lifestyle is not for everyone. As you know better than anyone, this is an incredibly beautiful place to live. It's a very enjoyable place to live. And it's my view that providing a place for younger age households, working individuals, earning a good income, to be able to stay rather than forcing them to leave is a beneficial effect.
You say forcing them to leave. I don't see anybody forcing them. They're going on their own. And it's not just the dwelling they're in.
Mr. Erickson, I apologize. We need to get to questions, I
Okay.
want you to, I don't mean to be rude, but I want to make sure that this particular
All right,
section
my
is
question.
questions.
Okay, my question would be then, there's dwelling, then there's some retail. If you're going to accomplish the Hoboken surrounding, this isn't a city.
You're correct. This project will not turn Bedminster into Hoboken. You're absolutely right.
Had a pseudo try to be.
It
Area.
won't even come close. It's a very small mix. It's a good synergy. There already is commercial space on the site. I think it's the right use.
Oh, well, I'm sure there's some folks that disagree. I disagree, but.
All right, thank you, Mr. Erickson. Anybody? Sure, come on up, sir.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Then please state your name and spell your last name.
Colin, C-O-L-I-N, last name's Hickey, H-I-C-K-E-Y. Just a quick question about one of the trends.
Your address, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry, Bedminster? Oh, 3 Desiree Court, Bedminster, I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
One of the trends you didn't speak to, which I was curious about, is given the overcapacity in the 100,000 square foot corporate campus office space, what is the nature of the trend right now to convert some portion of that into shared spaces like a Regis type space? Are you seeing that? How successful is that? And how predominant is that?
Yeah. So the idea of an adaptive reuse of a single user office building into more of a multi-tenanted type of a building, whether it would be a Regis, which is essentially a timeshare type of a model, or carving a building up into smaller size spaces, is a very difficult accomplishment. The reason is that the design of single-user buildings generally do not lend themselves well to this type of subdivision of the space. In the overwhelming majority of cases, the cost to accomplish that change is more than the finished product will be worth. And as a result of that, there is a long list of municipalities who very recently have declared existing single-user office buildings as being blighted and an area in need of redevelopment in order to facilitate the demolition and the replacement with an alternate use. It generally doesn't work, and one of the primary reasons for that today is that the market for large-scale office buildings here in Somerset County and in New Jersey is so devastated that Class A office buildings are routinely selling, have a value of between $20 to $50 per square foot of space. And they cost $300 to $400 per square foot to build. And so retrofit generally costs $200 per square foot. And you're all finished, you have a building that's worth less than $100 per square foot. And so it's the classic definition of economic infeasibility, because it's going to cost you more than it'll be worth at the end.
Does it convert at some point when there's X amount of capacity taken out of the system, either due to bankruptcy or some other disposal of the real estate, so that if you hit a certain inflection point, then suddenly the economics turn back around?
Yeah, I mean, if your question, to rephrase your question, if enough of office buildings fail and are demolished, and we eliminate them over time, you know.
And I'm presuming that because there was an overcapacity at the height of the market, where I might argue that they were never 100% fully occupied. To go back to your 50-year projection of reoccupying them, I don't think they were ever all fully occupied. I don't know what that percentage was. You may know that at the height.
They were never fully occupied, but the...
Do you know that number, by the way, what it was at the height of the market?
I do, but unfortunately I don't, what it was...
At the height of the market, how much of the 100,000 foot and above office space was actually occupied?
It was well in excess of 90%, because they were single-user buildings. They were built to spec for that particular user. And we've all watched how that has played out over time, locally and regionally as well. But if you're asking whether this problem will ever reach a balance point over time, anything is possible, but that potential is further out into the future than I can see.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? So you have to get sworn in.
Sure. Mr. Kentowitz is an attorney, and he can ask questions.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to ask a couple of questions. Mr. Earl, good evening. How are you?
Mr. Kentowitz, your client, please, if you don't mind.
Yes, Route 202-206 LLC at 2390 Lamington Road, corner of Lamington. I'm
Can you
sorry.
spell your last name, sir?
Yes, sir. Excuse me. K-A-N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, O-W-I-T-Z.
Thanks a lot.
I'm a lawyer with the firm of Abe Rappaport.
Thanks, Mr. Hanowitz, appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, you mentioned that and I'll to use your words, that the boutique office space would act as an incubator for larger office spaces. I take it that to mean that the effect of a boutique office proposal such as this would generate a reuse and a reoccupancy of the large office spaces you were talking
It
about.
has the potential to do that over time.
Okay.
Yes.
Based on your experience, can you identify any such incubation whereby retail boutique office space has incubated and resulted in the occupancy of a 100,000 square foot single user's office space?
Not of that size, not by itself, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanowitz. Okay. All right, so I think this witness we're through with. Why don't we take about a 5-minute break and then reconvene, promptly in 5 minutes so we can continue. Thank you.
That'd be great, thank you.
You own a big house, you're screwed. You might as well sell and run. The market's collapsing. Everybody's getting old, they have no money. And the board that wants to keep getting money to play.
Yeah. 100%. It's hard to achieve that balance. That's why he is, that's why he's the go-to. You know? Not you guys can do it. Honestly, we
All right, gentlemen, if we can get started, I apologize for running a little bit behind the 5 minutes.
Yeah, I took all these notes. Me too, but I mean, it's at the end of it, it's just...
All right. So we'll just take a second to get seated.
We're going to mark the whole thing as A1, and they want us to...
Okay, great. Mr. Melman, your next witness, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Dave Minnow. Care to swear, Mr. Minnow?
Yes, Mr. Minnow, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And please state your name and spell your last name and give us your address.
My name is David J. Minnow, M-I-N-N-O. My address is 80 Lambert Lane, Lambertville, New Jersey.
Mr. Minnow, you're a licensed architect in the state?
I am.
And which firm are you with?
Minnow and Wasco Architects and Planners.
So could you briefly go through your educational background, please, and your experience?
Sure. I have a Master of Architecture from the University of Pennsylvania. I've been a principal in Minnow and Wasco Architects and Planners for 20 years, and have been working in the area of mixed-use residential projects for over 30 years. And I've been in front of this board and several others in the area over the years. And our firm is approximately 75 people with offices in Lambertville and in Newark, New Jersey.
And you're familiar with this site, and your firm prepared the plans on file with the board?
We did.
Any questions regarding Mr. Minnow's qualifications as an architect?
No, it's nice to have you here, Mr. Minnow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we have a PowerPoint, Mr. Chairman, which I guess we can mark as A1, Mr. Collins?
Yes, that'll be A1, and we'll just confirm for the record that the board recognizes and accepts David Minnow's qualifications as an architect.
Thank you.
So we're going to make this A1, and it'll be all one exhibit. We'll also, although it's being presented tonight on the screen, we'll ask them to make a copy, digital copy and a hard copy to put in the file.
We will.
And we'll do that. Mr. Minnow, why don't we show your PowerPoint?
Sure. Just, I'm going to give you an overview. I get to do the fun part of it to show you the visual part of the presentation. As many of you are aware, these are some of the existing buildings on the property. The upper left-hand corner is the existing Forbes building. These are some smaller office buildings, 3 office buildings on the 202 side of the project that our firm was involved with, I think, about 10 years ago, that are sort of more of the smaller scale office buildings. And then the larger scale advanced office buildings, of which there are 2 on the site right now. Just to give people a sense of the overall location, this is Route 206, this is Route 202, Lamington Road, the Dillon Library. This property, I think, is strategically located for this type of use. And I'm not a traffic engineer. You're going to hear from a traffic engineer. But one of the great things about it is that we already have a signalized intersection at the front of the project. And we're bringing our traffic from the new development out onto a major highway. We're not dragging traffic through local neighborhoods past a lot of residential. We're putting it on a major roadway with access to 287 and all the other major roadways in the area. So that's a real benefit, that one of the impacts of this project is rather low in terms of how it will affect the broader Bedminster community. This gave you a great overview of the project, and I'm going to show you very briefly the site plan, and then I'm going to move into some other things and then come back to it. But the site plan that we're presenting tonight, series of buildings, and it's meant to be broken down into a village scale, and that's the reason why we're presenting this, is that we do think it's appropriate in terms of the architecture that's here. I know there's a question of density, but I think there's also a question that this type of low-scale, low-impact density brings some synergy, and you really need some energy in the spaces that are there to create a real place. And we've had some experience with that. But across from the Forbes building, which is located right here, this again is 206, 202 is back here. We have three of the office buildings 1, 2, and 3, which are each of them approximately 9,500 net square feet of space in 2 stories. That's a type of building that Mr. Otto was describing that might take these smaller incubator companies and use that space to be a catalyst to grow into other larger office space. These are purposely put rather close to the highway. Again, those projects were developed historically. They were developed close to the road because there weren't that many automobiles, there weren't big parking lots, and we're trying to mimic that. I know Mr. Banish, your planner, has encouraged people here and in other communities to, when they're looking at historic village development, to really have the architecture be prominent and the parking be recessive to the project, and that's one of the things we've tried to do here. We do one-story retail buildings with the hope that those buildings predominantly would be restaurant uses as they would lease up. You know, everything from the pluck 'em and in type of space to more informal restaurant facilities. The 3-story building here is a combination building with retail on the ground floor, and its main parking field is here. And on the upper floors are 2 stories of residential apartments. And the building to the right is a 3-story residential building that has what we call tuck-under parking from the rear. So not visible from Route 206, we have garages, individual garages with garage doors where people can pull into the garage space, get out of their car, and enter directly into the building without going outside. Very convenient way to live, and it's another signal that this is a little bit more upscale rental community than you would find elsewhere. We have a strong buffer to some of our residential neighbors in the rear. There's a very strong buffer area here, and also to the south, to the properties to the south at the point of the 2 roadways. It really functions as that integrated site plan where we have the existing larger office buildings, the Forbes building, and we're creating a village campus here. And I think Advance, when they gave me my assignment, they were saying, let's create a project here that really helps to reinforce the office space that we have and even the Somerset Financial Center across the street. For this office to be viable, people want places where they can walk to eat at lunchtime and do a little shopping and have a little convenience and sit in a pretty cool park or an open space. So we have some neat little sitting areas between buildings right on axis with our entry. We have some patio areas along these sides here. And we're trying to create the type of spaces, little gazebo area here, a park area near the office building, trying to create the kind of spaces that people really want to spend time in. And this is supportive and helps maintain the tenants that we have in the buildings and hopefully attract more. So architecture, that's why I'm really here, but Bedminster has a rich and unique architectural history. And with the historic buildings, they do locate themselves along street frontages. And you see great landscaping and great buildings and not much parking, because when those buildings were built originally, if they had a horse in a barn behind the building, eventually that got converted to an automobile garage. But that's what's so lovely about streetscapes, especially residential streetscapes in the area, is the great architecture that's frontal to the street. Some of the work that, I just wanted to show you some of the work that we've done in the area, and sort of, the reason I'm doing this is not to toot my own horn, but to say we get it, we understand what type of architecture belongs in a town like Bedminster. And my client is committed to the highest level of architecture here. And this is Schoolhouse Village, which we did many years ago, down the street toward Far Hills. Many of you know the project. But that really helped to transform what was at that point an abandoned school. A building just down from that we totally renovated into retail space and little shop space. This is a new building that we just designed a couple years ago in Main Street in Gladstone. This building is just a beautifully detailed building that sits just above Main Street. There's a little hill coming down to Main Street across from the train station. And you can see some of the interior pictures, the level of finish on the inside of the building. This is 271 Main Street in Pluckerman. Again, a dated house, and created a new little stone building in the back here as part of this retail facility. And then the barns at Gladstone, part of that project, and just the beauty of the landscape. And here, right here, is the sidewalk and the street. I mean, this building's full frontal to street. This project that's going into construction right now, Vernon Manor on Main Street in Gladstone. Here you have that type of village, type of setting where we're renovating an old barn building in the back, you see here on the left, and we're creating a new residential and retail village in the front. Getting back to our site plan here, I want to go through some of the buildings, but I want to show you what we don't want to do. This is mixed use. This is retail with office space above it, and you know where this project is. This is really not the type of architecture that we want to see here. We want to see architecture that really throws back to the historic era and really is compatible with Bedminster Far Hills region in terms of regional architecture. So getting the buildings themselves, this is our residential building, the one that's furthest to the right. It's 3 stories of residential. On the bottom is the ground floor plan, which has residences on the ground floor, and in the back, these are the garage spaces that I mentioned. There's a main lobby space here on the front side of the building facing 206, and there's a back lobby in the back. These garages can enter the building into the corridor system and go to the elevator and go up to the unit. It's a very elegant way to live. We think this will be very attractive to that segment of the market that Mr. Otto mentioned, the empty nester market. They really like this concept of parking in the building and coming right in. The other 2 levels are a consistent floor plan showing 1 and 2 bedroom units with an elevator core in the center. The building has a kink to it, which we think is good for the architecture and really speaks to that little bit of a village type of look. So here we have this all residential building, which has a combination of masonry facades, brick and stone on the ground level. Sometimes the brick comes up to the upper level. We've got traditional light windows. We have balconettes facing the more public streets, meaning we didn't really want to do full sitting balconies where somebody could leave a ugly chair out there or a dead plant. But we have more of a Romeo and Juliet balcony effect where someone can open a French door, enjoy a breeze, but not really be sitting out in the parking lot. So this architecture is punctuated by nice tower elements. These would be living room elements on the corner with a cupola type roof with a standing seam metal roof. Turned gables in several cases. Dormers in the roof as decoration. They're not really space up there, but we wanted to not have big expanses of roof, and you can see the roof is not a monolithic roof. It's broken with a lot of shadow line stepping in and out. The buildings are not flat. In apartment buildings, they have shadow line with vertical and horizontal breaks in them. The color introduced through different colors of shutters, different colors of siding, different colors of brick, but all in a traditional blend that I think is keeping with this general region. There are bay windows at times which also create good shadow line on the building. So these have good ceiling heights. They're 9-foot ceiling heights. Many of the windows are transoms. People love good light in these buildings. And this is the other, as the building turns in that front elevation, it has a kink to it, as I mentioned. This is the other end of the building. Like here you see the stone coming up to the third level with the balconets above. We think that this architecture will be very attractive to the markets that Mr. Otto described. Moving on to the mixed-use building. This is the retail level on the ground floor. There's an entry in the center of the bend in the building to the residential lobby, and there's also an entrance to the rear to that same lobby so that we can get to the parking in the rear of the building. And we do have a gazebo feature on the left side of the building facing the existing office buildings. The ground floor will be broken up into retail spaces as leased, and then the upper 2 floors served by elevator and 2 stairways would be, again, a combination of one-bedroom den and 2-bedroom units. For a total of 77 units, we have 24 one-bedrooms, 10 one-bedroom dens, and 43 2-bedroom units.
So the color code on the units, is that significant? Green and pink and...
Yes, it just relates to the little bit darker green color here, the one-bedrooms, the little purple or mauve color is a one-bedroom den. The bluer type units are the 2-bedrooms. And then these elevations are a little bit different. The building here is a little bit taller by a few feet. And the reason for that is that we want a good height in the retail space below. We want to be able to attract good tenants. They are more mechanical in the ceiling, so we need to have a little bit of additional height in the building. But again, we've got really great glass. We've got broken up fronts with different types of signage, some awnings, some canopies, but very attractive individual type signage on each of the retail spaces. Again, a consistent architecture with the residential building I showed you earlier. The roof, again, is decorated with dormers to break up the roof, and it is broken by both vertical and horizontal steps. We've also changed, it's hard to see in this slide, but in the actual rendering it's a little bit better. But the shingle color actually changes. Like this roof, it's a little bit more brown, and this roof is a little gray. So the idea is that this building looks like a composite of buildings, like in an old streetscape in a downtown. It was built over time by slightly different owners. And again, this is the other end of that L of the building as it faces Route 206. This Retail 1, which if you look on it's maybe hard to see, but it's the building on the left as you would enter at the traffic signal. So this is a 1 or 1.5 story building that could be broken into retail spaces, or it could end up being a single user. Our hope is that these may be more food-oriented type tenants out front, but we're showing you how that building breaks up. So this is the elevation that would face Route 206. Again, we've tried to break the roof height so that it's not just one monolithic looking building, but it's one that fits in with the architecture that's in the area. This is retail space 2, which is on the right side of the entry road at the traffic signal. This has a little bit more frontage along the road, and it's got a little bit more of an L-shaped plan with this cutout in the back. So this frontage here faces 206. This frontage here faces the entry road as you come into the project. Again, breaking the height. And we hope that this space on the corner, which has some extra height to it, will be a special dining room, a great retail space, maybe with some open truss work in the ceiling to really show a great architecture, and then maybe even letting the light from a cupola down through that space. So this is sort of a little, we think, a memory type of building with that little tower at the corner right as you enter the project. What you're seeing here is what we're calling Commercial 1. This is the smaller office buildings, and again, on the key plan, this building would be the one that's located furthest to the north on Route 206. We're showing here that this building might break up into 2 commercial spaces on the ground floor and 2 commercial spaces on the upper floor. Could be a single-tenant building, could be a 2-tenant building, we don't know. But it has a main entry lobby with an open space below and a little balcony space above that, and 2 stairways to provide exiting from the upper floor. Again, a very traditional architecture. These sit in front of the Forbes building, so you're going to get views through to the Forbes building as you go down the street, because these are broken into smaller segments, and that's another reason for the smaller buildings. But we really believe to get that village look, we need a smaller grain type of building along there, and these are all 2 stories in nature. This is Commercial 2, the second one, the middle one in the group. Very similar in terms of layout in the plan, but again, the architecture and the exterior is different than the one you just saw. Third one in the series, this would be the furthest south of the 3. And again, you see really, really interesting architecture here. And you see how even in this, if this is office space on the upper level, how the transom windows, or maybe even the window in the gable, may light a really interesting office space down below. So we're really excited about the type of architecture that could be here and the richness of it, and how it will blend in with this area. In general, people may feel like this project has a bit too much density, but I would make the case that the density or the intensity of use is what is going to make it successful. And I'm not just saying that to make more money for my client. I truly believe when you get a little bit of a tight space that's really well designed with great materials, both in the buildings and the ground plane, the way the sidewalks and landscape spaces are handled, I think it really begins to sing, and it gets to be the kind of place that you do want to go to because there's some energy there. The fact that we have 77 residential units in here is really good for the retail portion of the project, because these people, they won't do all their shopping and all their eating here, but they'll do a good chunk of it. So they really help to support the retail that's there. More in the evening hours, I would say, but the lunchtime hour is supported well by the office space that's there. So that's my story.
And you're sticking to it, huh?
I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Mr. Minot. So, anytime we think about projects like this, I mean, I know we all live here, and so projects like this always are exciting, and they always come with concerns.
Sure.
And it's an unusual piece of property because of where it's located in the zone that it sits in, or the 2 zones that it actually sits in.
Right.
And I think, our job is to really work with the developer and try to figure out how do you take something that could be good for the community, but how do you shape it so that it's fair for the community, and find the very best accommodations for neighbors and also the town itself. I know Frank has been guiding us towards village centers. I don't necessarily think that it's easy for Bedminster to find that, that equilibrium. It doesn't feel like we're ever going to have a true village center, but I think that this is close to Main Street, and it's got an interesting sort of connection to, the town's main thoroughfare. So, it's going to require work, and it's going to require, I'm sure, a lot of negotiation, but, your work is always excellent, and we appreciate the fact that you've come forward with such, interesting designs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would just say on behalf of the applicant, we welcome the comments. We understand that this is a large project.
Yep.
We understand that it's a significant piece of property in the town. We look forward to dialogue so we can work through this together.
No, we agree, and as I've mentioned to the developers, I think that what we have found is that getting the town's input, getting the citizens' input, whether it's through a working session or, in a previous project, we were able to have the developer do a town hall or so, and, possibly when we have it scheduled next time, if people want to come in early and speak to your dad and yourself and your professionals, it could be a nice way to get to know the community and get some input as we work through this over the next few months.
I'm sure my clients would be happy to talk to any neighbors if they're interested.
That's awesome. Great, thank you very much. Well, we appreciate that, Mr. Minow. Let me ask my colleagues if they have any questions.
I have a quick question. Can you repeat the breakdown for the 77 units? How many are one bedroom with den? And
Sure. 24 one-bedroom, 10 one-bedroom den, and 43 two-bedroom.
Thank you. I guess one more.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
The views that you had up there for your commercial 1, 2, and 3 buildings,
Yeah.
what would the view look like from 206?
That's what you're looking at.
So that's facing 206.
This is the, I found, if you read under there, it says the New Jersey State Highway 206.
It's hard from here.
I know, but all three of the ones I showed you were facing 206.
Okay, thank you.
But they're going to be four-sided buildings. I mean, if we get further than the use variance and we go to site plan here, we'll be bringing in all 4 elevations, and they're going to be as rich on what we might say as the backside as the 206 side. They're not going to be a facade here, and then the back's going to be vinyl siding. That's not what we're talking about here.
Mr. Minard, do you know by chance the distance between the highway and the primary facade of the building?
I don't, but our engineer, Rob, can tell you
We'll get
exactly.
that maybe at the next
Yeah.
meeting.
We also know your professionals have raised concerns about that distance, so it's sort of something we have to look at.
Okay, we appreciate it. Thanks. Let me ask the public if they have any
Well,
questions.
I have
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Adelia, sorry about that.
Can you go back to the first slide, please?
Sure. This would be the first architectural.
That wasn't the first slide. The first slide you showed.
You mean the title page?
The aerial photograph?
Correct.
Okay.
There you go. Can you point out,
I'm
no, one more forward, where you have the lots.
Oh, the site plan.
There you go. Can you point out the lots Mr. Cocoziello referred to that they control now?
If you don't know.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah, on Somerville Road.
I don't know exactly what lots they control.
Maybe he can point them out.
I mean, I'm really been working on the site that's in color here.
Right, that's not my question.
Okay, I can't answer that question.
Do you want to finish this, and we can bring Mr. Coziello back?
I think he would be the best one to answer it, yeah, for sure.
You can go out of order. You could just ask Mr. Peter to,
Can you just point it out to us, if you couldn't mind with a laser, or just maybe go up and point it up?
The top button, the one closest.
So that's the current, that's the lot that's under the partnership?
Correct.
Okay. Is that the only lot?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lot 33. Oh, I'm sorry. That's block 33, lot, I have to put my glasses on now.
Looks like 1501, is this?
Block 33, 1501.
Okay. Nick, go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
On the current buildings that are there, there's the Forbes building and another building, the big ones. Am I mistaken, are they vacant at this point?
No, they're not. I don't know the full extent of their occupancy, but they're fairly well occupied.
Oh.
I believe the financial center across 206 is vacant at this point.
Oh, I see, there was building mentioned that was vacant.
Yeah,
It's
for the west of,
I see. So, there's no actual work on those two buildings to somehow enhance them?
no, we're not, as part of this application, we're not proposing any new work to those existing office buildings. They would be 2 office buildings are the 2 I'm referring to, as well as the 4th building.
Okay, and they're just going to be there.
They're going to be there. I think the reason we're showing them in the site plan is that it's all one integrated property, and we're showing how the parking interrelates, the roadways, but more importantly, how, from a pedestrian standpoint, people who work in those office buildings can circulate through the site and easily utilize retail and restaurant space that will be produced here.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Let me ask the public if they have any questions. Yes, ma'am, please come up. Yeah, sure. Ma'am, why don't you come in the pink first, then we can have the, yep, come on up. Introduce yourself, we'll get you sworn in, okay?
My name is Stanford, and I live at Cambridge.
Ma'am, just if you could just turn around to Mr. Collins, our attorney, just so we can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. And please state your name again and spell your last name.
Okay. Stanford, like the university, and I live at number 1 Cambridge
Good,
in
thank
the
you.
hills. But I own property at the south end.
Which property specifically, ma'am, do you own?
On the right-hand side?
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah. I can't see the numbers from there, but it's pretty much where the carriage house building is going to be, the L shape. Does it say the lot number on it?
It looks like it's lot 23 on the map that we have.
Like over here, like, not the lot, this one.
Oh, that, I'm
Okay.
sorry, okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
And you currently live there, ma'am, or not?
I want to know what will the building behind it do to my property?
Well, is there a question that you'd like to ask the
Yeah.
gentleman?
I don't have a drawing of that facade of the building tonight. We will be producing those later in the application, but we have just to tell you what's between your property and the building, we'll have a heavily landscaped buffer on our property. Then there'll be a parking lot, and then there'll be the 3-story residential building.
That you've already.
And a lower level of that, which should not really be visible from your property because of the landscape buffer. On the first level of that, there'll be the garage doors that go into the garages in the rear of that building. And then there'll be 2 stories of residential above, which you might see that, but you're at a good distance from that. From where your house is located, if it's one of these 2 houses, you have a deep rear yard, and then you have the intervening buffer. So from building to building, there's quite a distance here.
I'm adjacent to the lot.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for coming. Anybody, ma'am, if you want to come up and ask a question.
I'm still very concerned about how this
Please
is.
speak to the mic and just state your name. You're still under oath.
Okay, Nancy DiCarlo.
Thank you.
I'm still very concerned about what will front Somerville Road. I'm looking at this in particular. Is this all buffer?
Yeah, it is.
And you mentioned there would be no entrance or egress into this property from Somerville Road, that all the entryway, all the traffic is going to come in off of 206?
There is an access point that currently exists, as you know, off of Somerville Road that comes into the parking lot of the existing office buildings. Connects through to our parking lot here. So there is a connection there, but from a...
That's been very minimally used. And I've lived here a long time, and there was always an understanding that that would be more of an emergency entrance or egress, because Somerville Road is a small residential, historically designated street, and we wanted to try to maintain that as much as possible. So with this scope of development, I'm very, very concerned about the amount of traffic coming down Somerville Road into this complex. It's huge.
I don't mean to put you off, and I appreciate your concern. I think it's good to ask that question. There's going to be another witness, a traffic engineer, who's going to give you some facts and figures about what traffic's expected to go in and out of both entryways. So he can give you those numbers.
Great. The other concern I have too is, as you all probably know, as keepers of the master plan, Somerville Road is the historic district. How accountable will these people have to be to uphold the integrity of the historic district?
Well, look,
When I wanted to put an addition on my house, I had to go before the historic committee 3 times in order to have shutters put on my
Right.
house. I'm listening to the designs of these buildings, they're beautiful, but I'm giggling because I'm thinking I would never be allowed to have a balcony. I couldn't even have shutters on my house. We had to go back and forth about paint color. In order to put a fence around my property, I practically have to sell my firstborn son, who lives in Manhattan, as does my other son.
Right.
So how are we going to hold these people accountable to the whole historic relevance of this village?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is
It's
an...
going to happen. It's
Right.
not just Vanderveer. That is the
Right,
Vanderveer
sure.
house. It's wonderful. That's not the total history of Bedminster. This whole Somerville Row Street, this building had to be designed to fit this historic district. So I'm looking at 3-story buildings with retail underneath. How is this all going to fit?
Right.
And what's going to be the view to the people living on Somerville Road to the back end of this?
Right. Thank
You
you.
know, buffers come and go.
Yep, no, look, though, I
To be
understand.
looking at parking garages and a lot, you know, I have serious concerns about this whole design and serious concerns about those multiple properties that were sold on Somerville
No, I
Road.
understand, ma'am. Well, that's really not part of this, but do you have a question to this witness?
I asked my question.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
comments. Sir, come on up.
Colin Hickey, I just had a question about the parking and the assumptions around how much parking, shared parking, because I know that was in the original plan. Could you elaborate on that a little more?
Well, I mean, our traffic consultant isn't here
Right.
tonight. He will come in and talk about traffic patterns, parking patterns, shared parking, all that will come at a later date.
So how much on this current diagram, though, is parking? How much have you allocated? And how much is assumption around shared parking? Are you saying it's all on the traffic side?
It's all, the witness will address all of that. It's not the architect. He does the buildings.
No, he doesn't do the parking.
That's correct.
When you design, though, you said the tuck under parking, is there dedicated parking for every apartment unit?
Generally, with these type of apartments, there's one space assigned, and then the other parking that is provided for residential is floating. But we're going to meet the required parking for the residential as part of this.
So what's the assumption around how many spaces do each residential?
Again,
Mr. Hickey, again, I want to make sure that we
I'm gonna
do have a
leave that-
traffic engineer coming in, and I want to make sure that we isolate questions to this witness specifically for his testimony.
Fair enough. I'm just trying to understand the...
No, I understand, and these are fair questions, and I think they'll get answered better and more professionally when we have the engineers come in.
Good enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up. You'll have just name, sworn in, et cetera.
You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And please state your name and address.
John Cronis, Kronis, 2 Wood Lane in Bedminster. And my question is, you had mentioned the Vernon Manor Village and Schoolhouse Village. Can you point to us to similar projects of this magnitude have been built somewhat locally?
I can't now, but I'd be happy to provide projects that I think are somewhat similar in scope, but I'm not going to find one exactly with this mix.
Of course, but just similar in scope, like, because I kind of know where Vernon Manor Village might be in Gladstone. How big is it? Like, what's its size? Or what kind of project was that?
First, I just think, I want to make sure that we don't get too far off track with
Right.
questions that he may not be able to answer, and I think
Right.
we want to isolate to his testimony with this specific project.
So then, how successful were these projects that you mentioned about Vernon Manor Village?
Yeah, it's not totally built yet. It's under construction, but Some of the other ones I showed photographs are built, including Schoolhouse Village, which is not residential, but it's a commercial office and
Okay.
professional space building.
So if you
Very
could drum up
successful.
some other, maybe some similar ones of this size and
Yeah, I
magnitude.
think we can do some in the region that
Okay.
are similar, yeah. Mhm.
Mr. Cronus, I will tell you, though, as a citizen, just forget the land use board for a minute, I always find that, when I always, Frank Banish and I have this debate a lot. It's always interesting statistically what other projects look like, but there's not a lot of Bedminsters around. So when we start looking at statistically how other projects relate, it's really not the personality that we have, and I think we have to be very focused on how it affects our town.
Right.
So, while I think Mr. Minnow will, I think, provide you some information, I'm not, to be honest, sure how all of that really should impact us. I think we need to focus on this project and how it's going to work in our town, and I think we'll get the best results out of it.
Along the lines, I had another question, but I'm not sure who to direct it to.
Right, well, if
Just
if
throw
it's
it-
not to him, then you can't direct it to
Then I won't
anybody.
direct it.
Right.
Okay, I'll save it.
There's more to come.
All right.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. All right. Yeah, come on up.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
And please state your name and address and spell your last name.
I won't reach that mic, though.
I think it comes out, ma'am, if you just pull it.
Nancy Wolski, 208 Somerville Road, and the last name is spelled Wilczewski.
Are you an adjoining neighbor, I assume?
I'm right opposite that entry.
Right. Can you just show me, just so I can get a bearing on it? I know you can't
Can't
point
reach.
up there, but, all right, I understand that.
Up there?
Yeah, that's fine, got it. So you're right up there.
I'm
Okay.
right there. I'm right there about that traffic that's going in and out. So that was my question. I just wanted to make sure there's nothing planned for those buildings that sit on 202 that would face my property? The three buildings?
These buildings here?
There's nothing?
Nothing planned.
Part of the application.
Okay. And at the risk of bringing up a similar source subject, there's no solar panels planned for those garages, is there?
No.
Just asking. To supply power to that whole new complex.
But you realize, of course, that people can, in our town, apply for solar in their individual homes, so, but it's not part of the application.
That was it, thank you.
You're gonna make it hard for us, huh? All right. Anybody else? Yes, sir, come on up. No, you come up, you're already up. It's,
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
And please state your name and spell your last name.
Brian Haggerty, Haggerty, Fairview Drive, Bedminster. My question is, and it may not be appropriate to you, it may be more for the planner, is where will the children play?
Okay. I can partially try to answer that. The planner may comment on that more. We don't expect many children here at all. That's been, I do a lot of this work, and in 1 and 2 bedroom apartments that are elevator served, we get very, very, very few children. And I can't say that there won't be any children, but people, the young formational families that Mr. Otto mentioned, they may come there, a young married couple, get pregnant, have a baby there, but by the time that child gets to be a toddler or close to school age, they're looking for another type of housing for that child. So we see very few school-age children in these projects.
You may know who I am in another role in life, but I actually wasn't talking about the school population.
Okay.
That will come through official channels in
No,
another
no.
form. What I'm actually talking about is, and you're talking about toddlers, 3 and 4-year-olds, where are they going to play?
There is no designated play area here for them.
Thank you. Straight answer.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kanowitz, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, thank you.
Come on up.
Mr. Minnow, nice to see
How
you
are
again.
you?
Nice to see such beautiful architectural work.
Thank you.
Since this is up, do you know the linear distance length shown for commercial building 1? That's the building, the leftmost lower corner building? the linear length of that, along 206?
This one.
That one, linear length,
I don't offhand know.
roughly?
Again,
Not going to hold you to it, just rough.
The site plan says 115.9.
115?
15 with 9.
115, okay, it's about 116, okay. And the same thing for commercial buildings 2 and 3, the other two going, I guess, in a southerly direction down that side of 206.
Mhm.
Are they about the same in
They're
size?
about the same.
Roughly. And what is the linear distance between the two sides of the building?
You mean the distance between buildings?
Yeah.
Separation?
Yeah.
The green space,
I believe that that distance is close to 40 feet, but I'd have to let Mr. Marcello answer that.
Okay, and just so I understand the picture, this darker brown that outlines the lighter brown shading, is that part of the building?
No,
That's what just,
that's groundscape, like patio area or outdoor area,
so it's 40 feet between the two buildings, roughly.
40 to 50 feet, I would say.
And what is the, do you know the speed limit along 206 at that point?
I don't.
And the streetscape that you showed for the historic buildings, one of the first pictured slides, there were two very pretty white, what I saw as white wood slatted. Where were those taken? Were those taken from Bedminster itself?
They were taken from one of...
Yes, those two, yes.
Yeah, this was, I don't have a specific location for this, but these are Bedminster buildings.
Okay, any idea what the mile per hour speed limit is along those two streets for those?
I don't know.
And going back to your site plan that you showed, is there sidewalks designed for in front of the buildings, between the front of those commercial buildings and along 206?
I don't believe so.
And just to clarify, and I think the end of your testimony was, the way this is shown, if one was living in the residential areas, one could, rather than come out to 206, proceed to come out the existing exit of Somerville Road for the existing office building.
I believe they could.
Okay. That's true of any user of any of the proposed buildings.
Correct.
I'm sorry, pardon my bad.
No, don't worry about it. Fine.
I missed it, and I'm sorry if I did, because I
Sure.
did like what I saw. Did you show I know you showed the frontages in response to one of the questions on 206 for the commercial buildings. Did you show the frontages for, and you did show it for these two buildings?
That's correct.
Did you show a frontage, you mentioned the frontage on 206 in the slide? Is
Yeah.
that just to the far end of that building?
I showed that entire, I put it in two slides, but I showed the entire frontage of that residential building facing Route 206.
And roughly, the rear buffer along the properties the side of the property
Right.
that borders
What's the
the
rear buffer?
homes on Somerville Road, what's roughly the proposed width of that buffered area between?
50 feet between the parking and the property line.
Great, okay. And I just want to be sure I heard you correctly, because there was a lot of information. Did you indicate that you envision as an architect or designer of this village, that you would expect that the residents would do most of their retail shopping or retail activity within this site?
They would do some, they
Some.
wouldn't do necessarily most of their,
Okay, I thought I heard most, okay. have you studied, in response to one of the questions that I think Ms. DiCarlo raised, have you studied in the, if the issue as an architect and as a designer, the visual impact of the proposed 2 residential buildings upon the properties on Somerville Road?
No, other than to feel comfortable that there's enough distance and enough ability to landscape within the buffer to be a comfortable, since I do a lot of work of one kind of residential to another, single family to townhouses, single family to multifamily, and they're like uses. They're residential neighbors, they're still residences, and it's not necessarily in this case that we're putting the close buildings to the property on Somerville Road are pure residential, and then the building to the left, the L-shaped building that has retail on the ground floor, the visible part of that building, I believe, to the residences on Somerville Road would be the residential portion of the building.
Have you prepared in any of your work to date any kind of visual display that would depict pictorially or visually what you would see if you either walked or drove slowly along Somerville Road from the south to the north, looking to the west at the proposed project?
I haven't yet.
So right now, there's no visualization of what kind of skyline or what kind of view a proposed buildings of those heights would create along Somerville Road.
Not at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Sure. Well, as long as you have a question, come on up.
Please state your name.
Dave Erickson.
Thank you.
On the little lot, is this remain as is?
Yes.
And what's the duration of the project anticipated to be construction-wise?
I don't think I can comment on that.
No shot, okay.
I think most of my projects, it's dependent on how it leases up.
Questions? Okay, come on.
Ryan Haggerty. I apologize, it's actually a statement I feel compelled to make, is although a member of the Bedminster Board of Education, I do not speak on behalf of the board at this time.
Mr. Hackett,
And-
I don't really, this is not the time.
I-
Okay. We're not taking any statements.
This is,
If it is not a question to this witness, we'll not take a
it
statement.
was part of my discussion
If
with
it
you.
is
when
not
you
a
mentioned-
question to this witness, we will not accept a statement. So please sit down. We will not accept any statements if it's not a question. We're not going to go down that slippery slope.
It's not a slippery slope, I was just saying the board is taking no position. I want to clarify.
I don't even, it doesn't matter. This is not a factor right now. So just thank you very much. All right, anybody else? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Minow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's what we have for tonight.
Good, thank you. Appreciate all your hard work.
Let's carry to a date certain, Mr. Chairman. Get a date and time that would be good for the board and for the next witnesses.
Well, why don't we talk to Mr. Melman and Mr. Farrar? What about, how soon do you guys want to prepare, and do we have a February meeting available?
February is basically full.
That February's full.
At the first meeting in March.
Who's first meeting in March?
KDC has to be carried to the first meeting in March.
They
Well-
asked, yeah.
Well, I think what we should do is,
But that-
what I would suggest is we push KDC back a bit, and let's take this application and deal with it, because we'll work with KDC on another date. Given the postponements, I'm not even sure when they're going to be back. So let's just work, let's find out from their attorney, from the applicant, whether or not they're prepared to move forward in a consistent way, and then we'll start scheduling some dates.
So what's open up though if we don't?
And it opens up March 3rd.
I would do March 3rd, and if Mr. Melman wants it. If not, we'll,
Yes, absolutely.
that's what I would suggest. Are you okay with that, Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Oh, I'm okay with the March 3rd. I'm not okay with uncertainty as to when KDC is being at least scheduled, because we did have an extension, I think, until the end of
Well, I would,
February.
we can give them some time.
Maybe it's the end of March.
The letter that just came in requested that it be carried from February 4th to March 3rd with an extension to the end of March.
Okay, so that's good. So let's,
Yep.
but we need to then meet again about it in March.
Right, but could we put them on the second meeting if we gave them part of that meeting?
You can give them part of either meeting.
We have nothing scheduled for the second meeting as of right now.
Nothing. Okay, so that's perfect. Yes, that's perfect.
No, just for February.
You okay with it?
Now- And now this first meeting in March.
Would you guys be okay if we did the second meeting?
And we can schedule it and ask them to attend at that meeting, and if they can't, then they'll have to give another extension.
Right.
Okay.
So that's all I'm trying to do, Mr. Chairman, is make sure that we have
Got it.
extensions. Okay, so on this application, we will be carrying, it sounds like we will be carrying this application, Mr. 2 funding, to March 3rd, that's 2016, at 7 p.m., and there'll be no further notices of this continuation of this hearing. But, Mr. Malin, you think you'll have your other witnesses that night? You're pretty comfortable you'll have?
Yes.
Okay, so the public and everyone involved in the Bedminster funding case, it's carried to March 3rd at 7 p.m., no further notice. Now, on KDC, is separate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
KDC, I don't know that they noticed for tonight.
No,
that?
KDC is officially carried to February 4th at this point. So any reschedule will be dealt with at
They
that.
got months ahead of them.
But we'll anticipate that we're likely doing KDC on March 10th.
March 10th?
Right, but we'll actually deal with the scheduling and carrying on February 4th.
Oh, so we have to, we'll do,
That's
got
when
it.
to be back, was to be back on February 4th. It will not be heard on February 4th, but it will be carried on that night.
Got it.
To some date certain.
All right, that works. You guys okay with it?
Yep.
Are we good as a group for this case on March 3rd? Can the 6 of you be here? Good.
Yeah.
Because we need you.
Yes.
I don't know if I could be here for the 3rd, though. I have to see.
Okay, well, we'll
We'll have to deal with it. I'm sure my colleague there can handle it. We'll see. All right. No, let's go through the, just, if we, hey, Mr. Farrar, we just knock out these pending apps just real quick to make sure we're in sync?
Sure.
So KDC Solar, we know we're going to try for the 10th now.
Yeah, it's officially to February 4th, and we have to deal with it then because it was carried officially to February 4th.
Got it.
Chesson is back on the books for February 11th. Leamington Holdings, the cemetery documents just came in yesterday or today. I haven't even opened them. We'll have to figure out when we're going to schedule them. Obviously not before March.
What about the presidential library application?
Have not seen that yet. Well, that may be somewhat presumptuous, but that hasn't stood anybody in the past.
of ours.
Yikes. All right, no problem, go ahead.
Costa Bia is still incomplete. Frankly, I think that we're at the point where we should send them a letter. They're either going to pursue the application or it should be dismissed without prejudice.
All right.
It's been hanging around for months and months, and they've made no attempts to move forward. MLG is on for February 11th.
All right, thanks, Paul. All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, adjourn, thank you.